Today, I have the good fortune to be joined by Micah Bergdale, who is the CEO of Joulez Incorporated, which is a new EV car rental startup. Let's have a chat. And for those of you interested in investing, check out Webull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All, and welcome, Micah. Thank you for coming on the channel and talking to me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sure. I guess we'll just start with maybe the easy one, but like, what's your background and why did you become passionate about what has got to be a very difficult thing to enter? You would think it's a large CapEx, environment. So I don't know, start with your background and we can work our way up.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is mostly technology. I started early in my career at Apple, worked at some dot-com startup companies. When I left Apple, I remained as an independent consultant, working with them for different small, medium-sized business opportunities. Early in 2010, 2011, started a company called Bytemark, which was actually focused on software specifically for mobility, which is really kind of what took me into the transportation sector more generally. We were focused on the mass transit industry, so ferries, buses, trains, giving a white label app solution for these different transportation operators to be able to, do ticketing, tell customers any delays, communications, all that kind of stuff. And that evolved over the course of 7-8 years, where as ride share, bike share, all these different kind of share programs became more ubiquitous, we ended up seeing a need to actually bring that data and kind of all the interconnectedness of transportation into one app. And so that's really kind of what pushed me towards being more engaged, at least on electric vehicles, car share related programs. And we sold our company actually to Siemens. So Bytemark still exists, but it's a subsidiary of Siemens. And I stepped down from the CEO position in 2019. Kind of took a step back, evaluating what I want to do, worked on some consulting projects within the transportation industry more generally. And I've always been a huge proponent and cheerleader for the electric vehicle industry. And it just felt like over 2021 in particular, that the time was right to look at having an exclusively EV rental company. And so we were actually a few months before the Hertz big announcement where they said that they were going to get 100,000 cars. So we can get into whether that's true or not. But the thing that we definitely saw in the horizon was the ability for the rental car industry to really kind of push the entire electric vehicle adoption forward. And the challenge that I see just generally with a lot of the different rental car companies is just that they don't provide a great customer experience. Most of these vehicles are computers on wheels. They're much more complex than traditional cars. Plus, you have to figure out, where you're going to charge it, how long it's going to take to charge. There's a lot of consumer interest, especially as you go down to millennials and Gen Z. They want to move towards this. But at the same time, we all know how to drive a gas car. A lot of folks don't necessarily know how to drive an electric vehicle, and not every electric vehicle is the same. So we really wanted to give people an experience to get behind the wheel and try a bunch of different cars and have something that's a little bit more unique than the traditional rental car industry.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, my next question was actually going to be why this company now, but you sort of explained that in that whole thing. I don't know if there's any other details you want to add to that or.
Yeah, I mean, I love. I'm passionate about it. I also, am environmentalist by heart. So, I want to see this transition happen. And, if I can have a successful company that can be a part of that process, that's fantastic. And that's really the motivation for it.
Cool. So I think that actually leads to a reasonable question afterwards, which is, and, I consider myself an environmentalist also. And a lot of us do, and we try to recycle and all that kind of stuff. But do you think environmentalism is enough of an incentive by itself for people to go with your company as opposed to, Hertz, Enterprise, Avis, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, a short answer, no. I think if you were only to say you have these great green vehicles, but then you ended up charging a premium well above where Hertz and Avis was, you're not going to be able to get customers. I think it's got to be a combination of a few different factors. One, the right price point. We obviously can't price them so high that it becomes unattainable for a lot of folks. I saw there's a new car subscription company, which is a different take on the model that just launched out in Silicon Valley here last week, and it was all Teslas. But the pricing for it, I couldn't wrap my head around why a consumer would end up spending that kind of money. And so we need to make sure that it's priced appropriately and that folks are able to get into these cars at the same rates that they would for traditional rental cars. And so we're trying to play around with the model that might include packages specifically for covering the charging. Obviously the cost of charging is going to be less than gas, and gas prices have gone up. So, there is some sort of incentive there, but just trying to kind of find different pricing structures that can be interesting to consumers and bring them in just purely on the basis of price, not necessarily just looking at, I want to be green and I want to be an environmentalist. And the other piece of it is customer service. I think the old Jerry Seinfeld bit of going into the car rental place and just being frustrated with the entire customer experience, it hasn't changed in like 20, 30 years. I have my favorite brands for airlines. I have my favorite brands for hotels, but when it's come to my experience of renting cars, I've never had a car rental company where I'm thinking, oh, that's just the most amazing experience. I got to rent from that company.
Right. I think like there's a sense that like Tesla is a little bit like that. I'm very happy we have one Tesla at this point, Model Y. But the experience of purchasing it, the experience of owning it, all of that stuff just felt so much more modern. And then we had our son had an accident, so we had to go shop for a new used car at a car dealership, and I was just like, it's like going backwards in time, right? And certainly, not to call Hertz out, but I'll call them out anyway. We went down to Mexico for a Christmas vacation, and while we were down there, I spent 2 hours at the Hertz rental car company, and where they were telling me that my $500, reservation was going to cost $2,000, and finally ended up walking away. And it was a horrible experience. So I would honestly pay a premium, like some percentage more than whoever's regular amount, just to be able to use an app and go like, here's the rental, go pick it up and not have to deal, or have somebody bring it to me. It sounds like that's what you guys do too, right? I mean, it's very white glove.
So, and that's the idea, is that the entire process from a financial perspective, that's already taken care of in advance. That's done through the app, that's done through the website. You're not haggling with anybody at a counter. And that is the last thing that I ever want to see for what we're doing. What I would love to see, though, whether it is you actually going to pick it up or whoever's dropping that vehicle off to you, depending on where you're at and whichever makes the most sense, is the ability for the person who is handing over the car to you to be able to walk you through the unique features of that car. And again, this gets to the kind of white glove approach, but also just the basics of the challenges that you're seeing, I'm seeing around electric vehicles. And I mean, I've driven Teslas. You obviously have one. They are not like a normal car. And if it's somebody's first time, even if it's their second, third time, I find myself learning new stuff every single time I hop into the one. Just being able to walk people through some basics of, hey, this is what you should be prepared for. Are you used to charging? So part of our questionnaire that we ask people, actually, if they're a first-time user, is, have you ever driven a Tesla before? Have you ever driven any other EV before? What's your level of experience around that? And if somebody says like, yep, I already own a Tesla, like this is just for when I'm renting because I'm going to XYZ, great. Then we don't really have to do a lot of hands-on. But I also want to support those people that are interested in driving one, but just need a little bit more hand-holding in that process.
And you do have cars for rent right now, right? So they're out there. And
just to be clear too, we're running on the Turo platform.
Okay.
So if you go to look on Turo in New York City, we are the only Teslas that are actually listed in New York City. You can go to New Jersey and see some. But we have a partner, actually, Noonan Auto Group, which has been kind of our operations partner. to just help us be able to distribute these out on Turo. They have the right type of insurance. We're waiting for our insurance to clear that would allow us to be able to operate in New York with direct rentals. But right now we're using the Turo platform.
Gotcha. Okay. That actually answers some questions I had for you later, because I was a little confused about that. But okay, so do you own the cars, or do you lease them? Yes. Or
so we own all the cars that we're renting out right now. Okay. We are actually looking at adopting the Turo style model. So one of the things that's delayed us a lot in the insurance process. One, insurance is not cheap, but yeah. Two is getting an underwriter that would support the type of structure similar to a Turo. So our goal for hopefully end of the quarter is that we would have both the insurance and our software fully set up, that if you own a Tesla and let's say you live in New York City, which this is not an uncommon thing, but you're only going to drive it 1 week out of the month. It's just to get out of the city that 1 week and go wherever, but you don't want to have it just sitting in a garage and then costing you money. So you're going to put it onto our platform. We basically take it from the point of you saying, okay, I want to list it, and we hand it over to the customer. And we play this middle management role. It's a little bit different than Turo, because right now what's happening on Turo is that either you as an individual, or what's happening in a number of markets is you have these super hosts, and the super hosts are actually managing vehicles on behalf of a lot of those owners. And we kind of stumbled into this model almost, and partially because of the company that we're working with, where we're seeing Atlanta, Las Vegas, San Diego, each of these markets has about 1 or 2 super hosts that are actually dominating the Turo listings. Mm-hmm. And they're looking at it and saying, I might as well not go and do a Hertz franchise or an Avis franchise. I'm just going to be a super host listing underneath Turo and manage these vehicles on behalf of other people. And they're actually the ones that are cleaning house and making the most amount of money of anybody in the entire process.
Gotcha. Okay. So I mean, going forward, is the idea that you're going to have kind of a bifurcated model where you will own some vehicles, but also be the middle?
Yes. Okay. I call it a bit of a hybrid or a blended model, because we want to have our own cars. We have APIs from Tesla, for example, and we want to do testing out of how our software interacts with those APIs in order to provide a custom experience on the Tesla. We work that on our vehicles, then all of a sudden we can go to those third-party owners and say, hey, we want to upgrade the experience that users are getting when they're renting your car. But we need to have kind of our own test vehicles in order to be able to kind of experiment with different things that we want to do and understand, where the demand in the market is, what customers are asking for. I mean, one thing that I would love to do, and I don't think this is pre-announcing anything, but it's something that is a goal of mine anyway, that if somebody put their Tesla onto our platform, and let's say, God forbid, there's an accident that ends up happening, that because we have our own fleet of vehicles that augments the entire fleet, we can go back to that owner and say, you can have one of our Teslas for a week while yours is out of commission getting repaired, and actually build up the fleet big enough to be able to support a structure like that. Whether that's because we give that person extra insurance coverage, or, what the financial details of that, we're still kind of working that out. But I've seen a lot of people who are super interested in Turo, but the thing that freaks them out is they have, maybe they have 2 or 3 cars in their family, and the idea that one of them could be lost because some third-party person ended up having an accident kind of freaks them out. So just trying to give, again, a little bit of an extra incentive that helps people feel comfortable about renting out their car, because they know that we as Joulez would provide them with a backup vehicle.
Right. Okay. That's the biggest reason, for periods of time, I'll be gone for a couple of weeks, and I could easily put my car up on Turo, but I won't do it because I'm too freaked out about the fact that, what if they have an accident or something, I'd be out. Yep. So,
and also just the customer service aspect of, and I know this has happened to folks where something bad happens and Turo just is kind of not our problem. So then all of a sudden you as the individual owner are dealing with this huge headache, whether it's on the insurance side, recovering the vehicle. I want to create a full service solution end to end. And we're looking at the crowdsourcing of vehicles as an alternative to financing the vehicles. But from a user perspective, it's a Joulez vehicle regardless.
Right. I got you. Okay. And you said, I know you've purchased some Teslas, and I think you've got a Rivian on order. Is that correct? If I'm
We have a Rivian on order. We have a Lucid Motors, a
okay.
Dream on order too. So we are going to have kind of a mixture of both very high-end vehicles as well as the entry level. We are waiting on finalizing some stuff with Polestar. We have orders out with them, but we just need to get the financing kind of lined up, which is taking a little bit longer than we had hoped for. But Polestar 2s, in addition to the Tesla Model 3s, we're kind of looking at those two as really being baseline. We looked at the Nissan Leaf, but it doesn't have enough charge. We really want to at least have a minimum of a couple hundred miles for our vehicles. Because what we're seeing is most people, particularly for New York City, they're not renting the vehicles so they can run errands around New York City. They're renting the vehicles so that way they can go out to Long Island, upstate, down on the Jersey Shore, getting out of the city a little bit. And they're just looking at this as part of that experience.
Right. I gotcha. Yeah. And it's a very nice experience too. So, so with these cars, and I think for people who don't know, maybe don't know Polestar, it's a partnership with Volvo, right? But it's actually a Chinese company that makes Polestar. Is that correct? Or okay.
So they were Polestar. It was a subsidiary, or may still technically be a subsidiary of Volvo. They are being spun off into their own IPO as an independent entity. But the servicing for the Polestars is going to continue to be at Volvo service stations all over the country, which is how Polestar is basically able to scale this pretty quickly.
Gotcha. Yeah, because people forget about the service thing. Cool. So, but if I was a customer and I was going to rent a car from you in the future, when you have a big selection of these, can I just sort of like with Hertz? Well, I mean, that's a problem with Hertz or Avis or whoever. It's like, I want a car like this, but you can never say, I want this car. But could I say, I want a Tesla Model Y, or I want a Rivian R1T? Or
so, I mean, I obviously I can't get down to, I want this Tesla Model Y that's white and has But my goal is that when you're saying I want a Tesla Model 3, you're getting a Tesla Model 3. And that when you're getting a Tesla Model Y, you're getting a Tesla Model Y. I'm fairly new to the car rental market in the sense that I've not had to worry about matching up supply and demand as closely as what needs to happen within the car rental industry. But my expectation is that we're going to manage this well enough that we can be able to have the vehicle that somebody has reserved available to them, and that they're able to take it when they say they're going to.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I imagine that like as it scales up, that gets more and more slippery because people cancel reservations, arrive early, arrive late, and things get really messy. So
yeah, I mean, and we're trying to create incentives, kind of the carrot and stick approach of you return the vehicle late, there's a penalty, but not be so harsh that it becomes a little bit challenging from a customer service perspective. And the same thing goes if somebody cancels a reservation, that they don't cancel it so soon. But, in this COVID world, it's also kind of challenging that like somebody just tested positive for COVID. Like, what do you do in those circumstances too? So.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's challenging. So, and I guess the question is still the same question, but it's interesting that you work with Turo. But I was curious who you believe your biggest competition is. Is it the likes of Turo, which is more of a crowdsourced rental sort of situation, or is it more traditional auto rental companies like Hertz and Avis and Enterprise, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a combination of both of them. It's one of those things where Turo is both a competitor and a partner, and it's not uncommon in this industry, and a lot of industries for that matter, where you're both competing against somebody and also partnering with them too. And they've been great, and there's definitely no knock on Turo. They have a certain model that they're going after, and we're going to kind of diversify a little bit away from that. But I think the Turos get around Hertz, Avis, Budget. They're all really the main competitors that we're looking at. But I also think that this is going to evolve. Lyft has gotten into the car rental market out in San Francisco. It's entirely possible with Tesla that as you actually have truly autonomous vehicles, that they actually start to do a little bit more in the car rental market or subscription stuff. We're going to see a lot of changes over the next 10 years. I think the company that actually holds the keys to the software that is managing a large fleet will be in the best position to be successful.
Right.
And that is really the way that we're trying to structure this. Is it's about us having a decent sized number of cars. It's about bringing in third party owned vehicles and then having a software platform that is connecting all of that and making it so easy to use and customer friendly that, regardless of what changes in the competitive landscape, that we have a really nice base of users that want to continue to use us.
Yeah, that does make sense. And certainly the autonomous vehicle thing is really going to throw a spanner in the works, as they say. If and when it ever gets there and it's approved, even if it's just geographically limited, like you're only allowed to drive in New York and New Jersey or something like that, you could still, that's great. That means that the car can come deliver itself to you. Maybe you drive part of it, but it drives most of the way. And, it just seems like that's going to really alter the landscape of auto rentals at that point.
There's another company called Vay, V-A-Y. They're based out of Hamburg, Germany, and they actually have an interesting intermediary step. And we're looking at their technology or technology like it, which it allows for the delivery of the vehicles, but it's not truly autonomous. And the vehicles are actually set up to where there's a virtual driver sitting in an office wherever who is driving the vehicle from point A to point B. And so you're not just relying on the AI of the vehicle in order to determine, is there a person walking by? What should I be looking at? It's as if you have a person sitting in that car seat, even though there's not physically a person sitting in the car seat. And if there's a loss of connectivity for whatever reason, the vehicle just pulls over. And I do think governments and the insurance industry is probably the other part of it too, would be very interested in that intermediate approach to allow for kind of a semi-autonomous vehicle. So you don't necessarily have to have drivers driving all over the place. I mean, imagine, we already live in this Zoom world anyway. Right. Now, all of a sudden, I can go ahead and just give somebody that's working from home a setup where they're able to drive a vehicle and they don't actually have to leave their house. I mean, there's so many different things that could apply to and could be beneficial for us, could be beneficial to the trucking industry, and really interested to see how that potentially plays out.
Okay. Yeah. And I hadn't really thought about that, but I mean, just in terms of your particular model, taking a car from wherever it's parked to the person who needs to rent it involves a person going to that place, driving the car, and then having to transport themselves somewhere else. Whereas if they could be just sitting at home, that they can instantly go boom, boom, boom to like different auto delivery, modes.
From a logistics standpoint, it would be a huge time saver. So, I mean, Enterprise, I talked to a great guy who was an executive at Enterprise, and he said, certain markets, the car delivery market opportunity that they have makes a lot of sense. And then there are other markets where they just had to abandon doing delivery of the vehicles because it just never made economic sense for them. Right. And I think you almost have to have a tool like what I'm talking about here that would allow for it to make economic sense for pretty much every market in the US.
Cool. Wow. So one question that I had, and I'm not exactly sure because I'm sure it's a complicated issue, but I'm curious how you deal with insurance costs. Like, I mean, obviously it's really expensive and you have to have some sort of insurance for the fleet up front, but then do you front that insurance as part of the cost of renting the car, or do you expect the people to have their own insurance, or is it an optional add-on like it is with most rental car companies?
So it's a complicated question, mostly because we're working that out with our insurance provider right now. What they would like to see, and I'm just kind of exposing like a behind the curtains of like what underwriting is asking for, that anybody that would rent a vehicle would come to the table with some form of their own insurance, and that the insurance that they'd get at the counter, so to speak, it's on the mobile app, obviously, it would just be an add-on that, a higher level of protection. Maybe their insurance has a deductible of $2,500 and they want to bring it down to $500. And so we cover that difference, something along those lines. But the accident rate for people who actually have their own insurance already is significantly lower than people who come to a rental car counter and don't have any type of car insurance at all. And so, and it's more about kind of building out that profile of understanding who's a high risk driver versus who's a low risk driver, and kind of understanding some of the unique attributes that we can put into our back end of saying, hey, for this person, because they have some sort of insurance. Now in New York, it's a little bit weird because not everybody has a car, but they could be a decent driver.
Right.
And I fall into that category personally. And so, and I haven't had an accident in 2 decades. So, well, actually, I take that back. It was a decade. And unfortunately, it was a Turo-like incident. I borrowed a car from a friend and I ended up rear-ending somebody, but it wasn't too bad. It basically their bumper had to be replaced. So, but I do think creating a profile that allows for us to know, who these drivers are, and that they are, responsible drivers that aren't going to end up in an accident is extremely important to, making sure that our insurance company isn't turning around a year later and saying, we can't insure you guys because you have all these unreliable drivers. We want to make sure we have fantastic drivers that are behind the wheel, and anything that we can do to understand who that is, or maybe it's the level of education too. Some people, again, this goes back to learning about the EV. It's all well and good that we have this new tech, but if people don't know how to use it, they are more prone to get in an accident. We want to make sure that we're avoiding that likelihood.
Right. Okay. Well, I could also see something like, it's with everything now. I was going to say Uber, but like everybody has the 5-star rating, right? So that like when they bring the car back and it's all good, you give them so they can, even without insurance, they could improve their rating over time.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I definitely think, they already have kind of a reliability metric built into the back end where, you see somebody that's rented 5 times and they've never had any type of issues, that all of a sudden you view that as being an ideal renter. We'll definitely be looking at that as our volume ends up picking up. Right now we have a handful of Teslas. God willing, we're at over 100 Teslas here by the second quarter, and really have some nice volume to be able to take a look at it. But right now it's just, we're trying to keep up with the demand just for the Teslas we do have.
Gotcha. I was actually going to ask you about that because obviously there's a financial aspect, but there's also EVs are really hard to buy right now. So I don't know if you've just had orders in forever and you're just waiting for them to be fulfilled, or
yeah. So over the past year, and so kind of going back to last summer and to now, we've had active orders for a number of different Model 3. The Model 3s actually every quarter we've gotten new Model 3s.
Oh, cool.
And then the Model Y, we should end up getting our first one here this quarter. We have a Model S out, hoping we made a pitch to Rivian. We'll see what they think, but we're hoping to get at least a couple Rivians and kind of jump the line a little bit in regards to that. And the incentive for them obviously is it's basically like putting a vehicle out there for test driving. Like, yeah, it would be amazing for us because we'd be the only Rivian out there that's being rented, and so I'm sure we'd get a lot of people who'd be interested in that.
Right. Quite honestly, I would be in line for that, just because I really wanted to drive one of the Rivian trucks and find out what it's like, and so I'd probably just like jump in.
You and me both. So
yeah, exactly. But actually, I think this is New York is its own beast, and we haven't really talked about that. But you're obviously starting in Manhattan, or is it in the 5 boroughs? Or
the 5 boroughs? Yeah, if we can call Staten Island the 5th borough. So, but the vehicles are based over in Queens.
Okay.
I'm actually based in the Bronx, where our goal is to have enough vehicles where we have parking facilities in at least Queens, Brooklyn, and Bronx. I don't think we're going to actually use any parking facilities in Manhattan specifically. And part of that is just kind of the cost benefit trade-off of the cost to park them. I'm literally, I'm in the South Bronx, I see Manhattan, and you come across the river and it's half price for the parking. So it's just a dramatic difference, right, in terms of the cost of parking.
Yeah. Well, my son lives in Flatbush. So and he's like, I'd love to live in Manhattan, but that's not happening anytime in my lifetime. So,
yeah.
So, yeah, that makes really good sense that you would do that. But I would think, like, especially as you expanded out, because I'm thinking a lot of people don't own cars in New York, right? Just because it doesn't make as much sense. But as you move to New Jersey and Philadelphia and upstate and things like that, I would imagine more people would want to rent the car just to try it, maybe, right? I mean, obviously the Rivian for me, but like for a lot of people who've never had a chance to drive a Tesla, they'd be like, okay, maybe I want to buy one. So let's, rent it for 3 or 4 days and see what it's like. So I don't know if you've had that. Have you had that already in terms of?
Yes. And I was in that boat. Like I rented a Tesla on Turo from an individual. This was over a year ago. And that was actually one of my aha moments as it related to this was how he interacted with me. He gave me his phone number. I was able to FaceTime with him while I was on the road. I did a longer road trip down to Virginia Beach from New York City. And just that sense of comfort that I had of having somebody that I could reach out to when there's just minor issues, nothing major, but just like, hey, I'm noticing this, what do I do with this? Was so helpful. And I mean, to me, what I'd like to have happen is, as we grow, we have basically a Tesla expert that is part of our team. We have a Rivian expert who's part of our team that they can easily answer questions while people are on the road.
Right. Okay. That's cool. I mean, even honestly, to this day, people can't figure out how to get into my Model Y. A first-time person will come up and they'll be like, what do I do? So just the fact that you have to push that back part and pop out the front, just like blows people's minds. So that actually does make sense. And it also, when you were talking about if people said I'm a total EV newbie, that you would have that person who would give them some help. Or I could even see potentially just having some tutorial videos that they could watch before they got the car too, right? And just simple stuff like, hey, open the door, push the back, pop, things like that. So very cool. So you don't have to answer this too specifically, but cars are super capital expenditure, intensive, and there's a lot, and insurance is intensive. So like, what sort of funding do you need to continue to roll this all out? And I see that you're on, what's it called? Start Engine? Is that right? Yeah. I'll put a link to that down in the description if people are interested in investing in it. But I'm just sort of curious, ballpark. Yeah.
So, our goal is to raise $1.07 million. We're just about to 225,000 right now. So, we've had some decent momentum over the past few months, but, we have the $1 million goal out there because it will take $1 million to be able to build up the fleet, build up the software. Easily. It is capital intensive. We are financing some of these vehicles in order to be able to get them out on the road. We've had a couple that we bought outright too, just to kind of get us going. And so, we're trying to be smart with the money that we're bringing in, but it's a great question. It definitely requires a fair amount of capital in order to really get this off the ground. Our goal would be, we raised the $1.07 million. We're able to prove this out within the New York City market. We're planning on expanding to the Chicago market, and we demonstrate, exactly how this would work, what the costs are that are involved. And we have a couple different VCs that we've already talked to that, basically would be kind of post Start Engine, looking at putting in a $1-2 million round in order to help us kind of grow into some of these other markets.
Right. Cool. Yeah, I hadn't really run the numbers, but just to completely roughly guesstimate, like if you were renting for like $100 a day, and you have to pay the car back, obviously, but I'm just trying to like figure out percentage wise, like that may be too detailed for you to give me, but I'm just curious, like, if you rented for about that much money, how much money percentage wise comes off the top just to pay for all the stuff you have to pay for before you can really start to book anything in terms of profits?
Yeah, in order to be cash flow positive on a per vehicle basis, and assuming that the rental rate is around $100 a day, you need to be in the 50 to 60% utilization phase. So, of the days in a month, you need to be renting about 50% of them in order to make sure that you're covering your costs.
Gotcha.
Because each vehicle is different, so it's not like a dollar amount would be helpful, but a percentage, I think, is probably the most helpful metric.
Gotcha. I see what you're saying. And are you finding that there is an interest enough in your cars that, even though you're not like the big guy rental company right now, Do you find that there's enough interest in the cars that it's
Oh,
generating?
completely.
Oh, okay.
For all the advertising that Hertz has done about Teslas, there are no Teslas available within the New York City market or the Northeast market.
So they go and they look and they find you instead, and you're like, yes.
Yeah, and so that's the thing is we are actually available to rent right now, and I mean we'll see what Tesla does, and it's not like they don't have any, but it's been very centered around California, and which makes sense because there are more California drivers that are used to driving Teslas. Right. So to have them as a rental option in California absolutely makes sense, but I think we want to be a leader within the Northeast region and going into the Midwest, and again give a much more diverse offering of vehicles because Hertz right now is only Model 3s. Right. We want to actually have a number of different types of vehicles that people can rent.
Right, I gotcha. So, and here's a kind of a related thing, but like with a ICE car, internal combustion engine car. My understanding from the outside is that rental car companies usually have them for about 2 years or 20,000 miles ish, something along those lines. Do you foresee the fact that you have electric cars, not just the Tesla, but all these other cars, that they require so much less maintenance? Do you foresee being able to own the cars for longer and make more off of them before you have to sell them off and get new ones?
I mean, from your lips to God's ears. We'll see. I mean, that would be the ideal scenario. The challenge, of course, is how fast are the batteries getting depleted? Are there other maintenance issues that are unforeseen? What does a vehicle look like after it's hit 100,000, 200,000 miles versus a traditional gas car? So much of what has been studied around the rental car industry and the traditional metrics that have been put out there is purely gas-based vehicles. And so we're kind of in this new frontier of understanding how we could potentially use these vehicles. With that said, there's also really interesting opportunities for how these vehicles could be used outside of just renting them out that could be revenue generators for us. So we're really excited to kind of explore that.
Oh, cool. Okay. You can tell me or you can keep it secret for now.
Again, I think it plays into the fact that these vehicles are computers on wheels, and the ability to tap into those computers and the battery and utilize both of those assets, whether it's on the grid, whether it's just being able to take advantage of the computing power. There's some interesting things that we could potentially be doing with that.
See Bitcoin mining in your future.
All sales, we're going to turn into a crypto company. So
the car's only going to it'll get 20 miles before the battery's drained. Okay, so I guess you said Chicago is probably your next major market that you were going to look at. What sort of timeline are you looking? Ideally, how fast are you looking to get out there?
Ideally, second quarter of this year. So pretty quick. So my longtime business partner is actually based out of Chicago. I have a number of different business partners and people that I've worked with because I used to live in Chicago before I had moved to New York. The other thing that really kind of pushed us there, though, was that when we talked to the insurance company, they wanted to see a diversity of where the fleet was actually based out of, and they didn't want to just insure New York for a lot of different reasons. They just want to see another geography mix in there. So they said that the Midwest tends to be the easiest to insure, less likelihood of theft and less likelihood of a number of different things. So
gotcha. Yeah, I don't know if I'd try Atlanta just because the drivers here are totally terrible. But I'm calling out my local area.
There definitely are bad drivers all over the place. So.
Yeah, I know. They're just bad in different ways. How's that? So actually, on a personal level, I was going to ask. I'm actually going to be visiting my son in May in the New York area, and I guess I'll be able to rent a car from you guys, right? While I'm up there,
that'd be great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I will definitely give that a shot. I'd much rather rent a Tesla than who knows what, a Kia or something like that. But actually, that brings up the question of I've heard people talk about the potential that Tesla, or maybe you, since you have access to their APIs, could create transferable profiles. Because one of the cool things about, and you don't own the Tesla, but I have it, and so my profile is stored there. every time I get in the car, seat goes to the right place. The music is set right. The temperature controls, heck, I use centigrade instead of Fahrenheit. So it goes to, it changes all that stuff for me. And I just don't know if that's something that you guys could do on top of what Tesla does, or whether you would need them to essentially do that for you.
No. So that's the great thing about the APIs that they've opened.
Oh, cool.
Sorry, I'm getting the hiccups. Okay. That we have the capability then to tap into the user profiles and create that on the back end of our platform. So that way, when somebody hops into these different Teslas, that their profile is automatically available to them.
Wow. That's super cool. And that's actually something I didn't know. So thank you for informing me and everybody else. I didn't know that Tesla had opened up APIs to developers to actually hook into their.
So, and it's not publicly available, you don't go to a developer.tesla, but we signed an NDA in regards to accessing that. And it's part of our enterprise package that we've got set up with them for buying our future Teslas. So.
Wow, that's really, really cool. And that's really nice for the future too, because that, it just shows what a modern company they are. They're it's essentially a software company. It's here's our APIs, here's the hooks, you do what you want to do, connect it all up.
and I mean, there's so many different Tesla developers that are out there that have kind of done these Tesla hacks. And we probably aren't going to go as far as some of the folks out there, but definitely enjoy kind of finding unique things that we could be offering on these vehicles that you wouldn't necessarily find at a Hertz or an Avis. There was a guy that was I think he was out of Estonia, if I remember right, maybe Poland, but he had hacked his Tesla to where it could do CarPlay. And again, one, it's annoying that Tesla has such animosity to Apple that they don't have CarPlay integrated into it. But it's an example of something that we would seriously look at and say, hey, do we have enough iPhone users that would like to have CarPlay actually built into this, that we could use some sort of hack like what he ended up doing, which is actually a very inexpensive hack. It basically utilizes the built-in browser in order to put CarPlay directly onto the dash.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, I would actually like it mostly for the music aspect. I really like actually their maps, but everything else being integrated with my iPhone would be really nice. So anyway, yeah, I don't know what's up with Tesla and Apple. It's they need to be friends. Let's take, I've been talking to you for quite a while, but let's take a moment and just go a little bit broader. So not only for you and your company, but for the entire rental car industry. What do you see as the future of that? I think you would agree with me that it's probably ripe for disruption, but let's take 5 and 10 years and just kind of give some ideas of where things are going to be then.
I definitely, it's going to be much more mobile centric. We've got to get rid of the paperwork. It's insane to me in 2021 that I go and rent a car and I still have piles of paperwork that they physically hand over. It's just that they're so antiquated and nobody's really forced their hand to make changes. I also think that you're looking at a situation where people are going to be able to hop in the car and it's going to be a bit more remote engagement when it comes to customer service. So one of the things that we're looking at doing is actually having a Zoom link integrated into our app for customer service purposes.
Oh,
so
cool.
You're not deploying as many people specifically on site to the car rental location, but you are making someone available that they can have a video interaction with them. I'll be honest, and we've all lived in this Zoom world, but we still have traditional customer service, whether it's 1-800 numbers or chat bots that exist within certain websites. And there's just so much more to be gained by having a eye-to-eye contact with another person when you're talking about a problem that you're having. And I just, it also tends to lower the temperature. You just generally find that people, when they're having a direct conversation where they can see the other person, they don't overreact as much, they don't get as emotional. And it's easier also for the person on the other side to be like, I understand what you're saying, and actually mean it. Sometimes you have an 800 number and they say, oh, I understand. It's like, you don't understand anything. What are you talking about? So I want to find ways that help kind of bridge the customer service gaps that exist within the car rental experience, and really try to make it something very special. And I hopefully, whether we're 100 vehicles, 1,000 vehicles, 10,000 vehicles, whatever that number is, that we're making enough of an impact that it forces the industry to really start to make some changes that I think are long overdue.
Talk about from your lips to God's ears, man. It's seriously like, we love to travel, and the thing that absolutely like raises my temperature before we even go, I'll book the flights, I'll book the place, and then I'm like, oh, the car rental. It's that bad. I mean, it's almost like I'd rather go to the dentist and have a tooth pulled or something than to have to deal with the car rental experience. So anything you can do.
As a side note, I'm actually banned from being able to rent from Hertz or any of their properties. So,
what happened to you?
Which makes for a fantastic story. So, especially for getting into the car rental industry, someday I'll probably meet the Hertz CEO and we'll be able to tell him all about it. No, I was a loyal Hertz customer for a number of years, and partially because I had Amex Platinum, and so they kind of push you towards running on Hertz. And the experience was generally okay. It wasn't anything to write home about, but it was just, quick, simple. I had rented from them for a number of years, and I was visiting family. This was in Rapid City, South Dakota, so out in the Black Hills area, and rented from that Hertz location before, but they ended up getting brand new vehicles that were delivered that day. And I think they were all Nissans, if I remember right. It was something about the vehicles that came from the factory. And I say fresh with like 0 miles on these vehicles, right, like straight off the bed of the truck. And there was something about it that gave me an allergic reaction. I had burning eyes. Oh. And I struggled to kind of breathe in the car. And so I had the car for a day. It's like, this is crazy, because I was planning on driving across the state. And so that's a 10-hour round trip across state in South Dakota. And I took it back and I said, listen, I don't know what it is about this car. And all of them were brand new. I noticed I was having a similar reaction if I got into the other ones. And I was like, if all you have is brand new, I need to rent from somebody else, because I don't know what happened at this manufacturing facility. It's probably fine after it's been aired out for a few days or a couple of weeks, but I can't be in these cars. And they were like, well, that's fine, but you're going to have to pay for the 1-week rental that you reserved. And I was like, no, I'm not going to be forced into a 1-week rental when I'm having an allergic reaction to the car, and I'm certainly not going to keep the car. And yeah, it was insane. And it got to the point where, I'm disputing it on Amex. Amex stood up for me and they held the dispute. And so Hertz then just blacklisted me and said, unless this guy pays, $600 or whatever that weekly rental rate is, that, never rent from him or rent to him again. And I mean, it's so perplexing, because one, I've been loyal for years. I was President's Club or whatever, BS title that they end up giving you. And because I wasn't willing to pay them for a car that I wouldn't even have been in possession of, now I can't rent from them ever again.
Right. And also, I mean, just on a human level, you're having some sort of allergic reaction to the car, and that's,
I like
it's just basic customer service stuff. It's like, okay, that's our bad, Jeez.
And listen, I get it. Sometimes, the car manufacturing is not the same in every single company. Teslas, I haven't had any issues when I've gotten into the car brand new.
Yeah.
But then again, the first one that I am getting that I drove the most was a floor model. And that probably, even though it didn't have many miles on it, because it just had been sitting in it just airs out pretty quickly. Yeah. So it's just hard to say. I mean, I definitely had some sort of allergic reaction. And I just don't understand how, from a customer service standpoint, you can say, all right, we understand. We'll charge you for the day. I was even willing to pay for the day. It wasn't like I was like, I don't want to pay for anything. Right. It's like, I rent it for a day. I'll pay for the day, but.
Well, but it's also just kind of insane, because it's like, even if they just looked at your customer record, they could have been like, wow, he's spent a lot of money here. $600 is like nothing compared to, or whatever it was for a week.
I mean, easily over the course of those years, like 20 grand plus. I mean, like I bought them a car. Like,
Right. Oh, well, on that note, not to go too far down that rabbit hole, but that's just, it's just one anecdote about how atrociously bad the whole experience of renting cars. It really is. It's like the worst part of traveling for me. And if I can ever do it without renting a car, I don't, because I hate it so much. So that's why I'm excited about trying this in New York and New Jersey. That'd be really fun to be able to, rent from you guys.
Well, definitely let me know, and hopefully we have some vehicles available when you come.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds great. Well, anyway, thank you. We ended up speaking for, it was supposed to be a half hour. It's longer than that, but thank you so much for talking to me, Micah. And I really, really, I don't know. I think this is really cool. I think not just the EV aspect and the green aspect, which is super important, but also just the whole thing about improving the whole what halo around renting cars is going to be helpful, including the fact that, like, when you get in the car, I like the idea of having Zoom available, because you really feel like you're on your own. Like, you get the car and you drive out of the lot and you're in a different city and even a different country potentially, and you're like, oh geez, what do I do now? So it's really nice to think that you would have a safety net, that you're not just completely on your own. So I really like the idea. And of course, if people are interested in giving you, getting in on board and investing, you can definitely check out the link in the description, or go to it's drivejoulez.com, right? JOULEZ. So yes. Almost like the guy that the electricity stuff is named after, but with a Z instead. So
yes.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
And thank you.
Have a lovely day, everybody. We'll talk later.